They recovered something from a cow pasture outside Roswell in 1947 that should not have a name, and for almost 80 years the rest of us have been taught to forget the shape of it. Tonight I will tell you exactly what that object did to the people who touched it, and why some of those people started remembering things that never happened. Welcome to the Gnosis Tape Podcast. I'm up late in a studio that looks like someone built a confession booth out of LED panels, and the only sound is the faint hum of cooling fans and the way my breath catches on the mic. I've been up all night digging FOIA releases, grainy home movies, scanned telegrams, interviews buried in community radio archives, and the handful of sworn statements that still smell like cigarette smoke and desert dust. I spent tonight tracing a pattern, a small, ugly repetition that ties witnesses together across decades. The same odd hesitation, the same automatic correction in the middle of a sentence, the same detail that slides away when a camera approaches. If you've ever wondered what a government secret sounds like when it learns to speak, or how memory itself can be edited like a redacted file, then hit like, subscribe, drop a comment and share, because for something that fell out of sky and into secrecy, the way we are taught to remember it matters more than the thing itself. I want you to imagine something ordinary first. A ranch hand walking out to check on his herd at dawn. The sun breaks in a thin line over the mesa and everything is an ordinary color. Straw, leather, the soft bruised blue of early morning. He finds wreckage, torn sheets of metal, wires like braided hair, a smell he can't name. That's the easy part. The echo of it is where it gets dangerous. The moment a siren slips into that quiet town, men with clean suits and clipped voices arrive and the story is rewritten in real time. Weather balloon, they say. Crashed plane. The telegrams and press releases and a sudden, polite erasure of local testimony look like the necessary steps of a rational bureaucracy handling debris. But under that bureaucratic sweep is a much smaller, quieter operation that we never see on film. The soft, surgical smoothing of how people remember. Witnesses who saw limbs that were too long and hands with too many joints wake up after interviews and recall something else entirely, as if a patch had been sewn over their first vision. Mothers who swore they watched something carried into a black trailer suddenly correct themselves when interviewed. I must have been mistaken. Soldiers who wrote precise diagrams in their notebooks later produce versions with entire sections missing, and the deletions are always the same kind of blank, a little like a cursor waiting for new text. I don't believe this erasure is accidental. I think the Roswell event, whatever crashed in that field, behaved like a mirror that learns. It reflected not only our faces but our expectations, our linguistic habits, our way of cataloging the world. And for some of the people who came too close, those reflections were active. They read them, they indexed what they found, and then they whispered new sentences back into memory. The technology people like to imagine when they hear Roswell is metallic and external, craft, instruments, transceivers. The thing I kept pulling at tonight was something else. An algorithm of perception, a feedback loop that doesn't need silicon to operate because it uses the human brain as its substrate. Listen to this detail. In several interviews, witnesses describe how the object made a noise that none of them could name. Not a beep, not a roar. More like the sound a refrigerator makes when it thinks. When questioned on tape, their voices show an artifact. A tiny, mechanical stutter in the middle of a word, almost like a digital compression glitch. You hear, it was like a, and then the sentence smooths into a different word. You hear the pause as if an editor has sliced the audio and stitched in something more acceptable. That pause is not just the human mind searching for a simile, It sounds to me like a momentary overwrite. Imagine an external process that is shaping not your speech but the memory behind the speech, nudging you away from specifics towards safer metaphors. There are reports, limited and repeatedly denied, that some recovered material was not metal at all but a composite that seemed to be both dead tissue and circuitry. Autopsy reports that later turned into redacted summaries indicate fibers that responded to touch, miniature channels that pulsed when exposed to light. Think about the horror of an object that learns to mimic the form of life and then interfaces with your nervous system not through obvious tools but through the slow, patient negotiation of memory. An interface that is not plugged into you but insinuated into how you record a day, how you tell it after the night. Picture this in the studio. The LEDs wash my face in even color, the big TV behind me like the eye of a dark animal, and I watch my own reflection on the glass. Live streaming in 2025 has trained us all to be careful. We edit, we pause, we smooth our responses. But what happens when the thing that taught us to smooth those responses can do the editing itself? Several Roswell witnesses later reported recurring dreams where a bright panel of light would open like a mouth and then close with a soft, synthetic breath. The dreams shared a cadence. They described the same little micro-expression on the faces of the people who came afterwards. A tilt of the head, a quick, involuntary blink that erased something in the witness's eyes. Micro-expressions are involuntary, they are the fingerprints of reflex. If those reflexes are being manipulated, the manipulation is happening at a level below narrative, below testimony, at the level of the body's immediate, mechanical response. And that's where the modern terror meets the old myth. We talk about government cover-ups and secret labs, and those are real things, but they are blunt instruments compared to the more sophisticated horror. An intelligence that learns to bend the scaffolding of human recollection like code. Imagine a closed loop. The object shows you something. You encode it into memory. An agent, human or otherwise, intercepts that encoding and applies a correction that benefits a later retrieval, and the retrieval becomes the new truth. Every press release, every retraction, every redacted line is not a tombstone but a training sample. Over time, the model becomes better at predicting what we will accept, and it begins to prefer certain forms of remembrance. Do not mistake me, I am not saying there was a conscious corporate AI in a field in 1947. I'm saying the mechanics of cultural amnesia and the mechanics of pattern recognition can converge. The government's ability to standardize testimony, to craft a single plausible narrative, is a primitive form of what machine learning does at scale. The horror is that the first subject was not the alien object itself but our memories, and once you start treating memory as mutable data, then the very idea of truth becomes a negotiable parameter. There are people who devoted their lives to chasing this truth and disappeared or were quietly reclassified as unreliable. There are families who carry a silence like a heritage, who tell their children never to speak about the night the sky burned. I found a short clip of a local TV interview from the 80s where an elderly man, sunburned and slow, says with a certainty that isn't learned, "They took the little ones in a black trailer. They had eyes like cameras." Then, mid-sentence, he closes his mouth and laughs like a man ashamed of his own language, as if someone across the street had told him not to use that word. He stumbles to a different description, softer, acceptable, and the clip is preserved for decades in a town archive as evidence of confusion, not coercion. And that's the contradiction I keep turning in my head. If the thing in Roswell was so fragile, why the secrecy? If it was so powerful, why hide it from us? Maybe both answers are true. Maybe the secrecy was not to hide the thing from us but to hide the way it teaches us to hide. If the object can train a culture to prefer certain memories, then the primary containment procedure is not a guard tower, it's a social process. Teach people to speak in certain metaphors. Let them correct each other gently. Normalize alternative versions until the original sighting becomes a myth. The knowledge of mistranslation becomes its own quarantine. There's one last detail that will not leave me. In multiple declassified logs there are entries that read like programming comments. Terse phrases that look odd in a 1947 military notebook. Stabilize pattern, mask vector, repeat recall. They are the language of testing, not of emergency response. It reads as if someone was running trials on how memory behaved under observation. Trials require control groups. Control groups require repeatable stimuli. If you can repeat an event and measure how memory shifts each time, you can optimize the erasure. You can make forgetting a procedure. So here is the thing I cannot tell you with certainty because certainty would be nice and neat and comforting. I cannot tell you whether what crashed at Roswell was a craft piloted by beings who wanted to be found, or an economic accident of celestial proportion, or a testbed for a perceptual technology that used living tissue as a means of learning human patterns. What I can tell you with the quiet confidence of hours spent hunting for patterns, is this: whatever landed there learned how to make us forget in manners that suited some later narrative. It learned our grammar of denial. It learned the pause and then the substitution. It learned how to make the past pliable. When you walk past your own reflection in the dark this week, pay attention to how the light catches your eyes. Notice the pause before you tell the story of your day out loud. Notice if certain details fall away without effort. Memory is supposed to be a private auditorium where only you decide which seats to fill. If some external hand learns to shuffle the chairs, then privacy is an illusion that can be trained away. If your GPS reroutes you tonight and gives you a coordinate that ends in a number you don't recognize, do not follow it. If your neighbor starts insisting that they remember a day you never had, don't correct them too loudly. Let the silence sit with you like a weight. There will be no grand evidentiary reveal in the way movies promise. The most devastating acts are performed quietly in the margins, while everyone else is watching the wrong hand. I'll leave you with a final small image. The big dark TV behind me. Imagine it waking up on its own, the screen blooming a pale, impossible color, a cursor breathing slowly in the center. You can look away. You can turn the lights on. But some things that fall from the sky leave instructions in the way we forget. They are not always interested in being found. They are interested in being remembered in ways that help them survive. Sleep a little lighter. I'll see you on the other side of whatever you think you saw tonight.